It's it's one of those things where it's like this brings so much to the city alive again. It's like we have such a big winter. You have all these concerts that end in the fall. We go through this kind of dead season, and then you have this, and it just brings the city back to life. And it's for the most people that live here. We're like, oh man, there's just gonna be traffic and it's gonna be busy. And then you have the bachelorettes and bachelorettes and bachelorettes. But now it's like when you're here and you get to be part of it and you get to walk it, it's a lot of fun. And just watching people enjoy meeting artists and getting to hear music. It's the coolest festival you could be part of. It's funny. It's like when you travel to these other cities in the world, or in the country at least, you have towns that are so small where like all they have is that one venue. And, you go to places like New Orleans, you go to New York, you go to Los Angeles, Chicago, and these music cities where it's like you have really cool venues, but they're all spread out. And we're just so lucky to have a whole street that just gets bombarded. I mean, I've done the New Year's Eves here where I've sat amongst 100,000 people to watch Chris Stapleton sing, and it's just like you forget how cool it is. We can complain about it all we want, but it's like there's no other city that we have like this. So it's real fun to watch people just get excited and be part of it. When you create something around the culture of the town, and like even though the town's getting so much bigger, it's like you still have things like this that show people like, hey, this is what we do here, and it shows why people still move to this town to play music. It's funny. It took me a long time. I remember I was traveling back and forth to Los Angeles, and I could play piano. I could play a lot of guitar. People were trying to make me sound like something, and I just couldn't figure out what it was that I wanted to do yet. And once I started taking in more of my, like the folk influences that I heard as a kid, and then some of the earlier moments my parents listened to country music and listening to that and really realizing what I liked, and then taking the big blues rock guitar thing that I had done in bars for so many years, it kind of all clicked, I don't know, maybe in the last 10 years. Like when I moved here, I really started getting a good sense of, once I started writing music for people more than playing for myself, I started getting an idea of what I wanted to sound like, and I just let it kind of happen naturally. Like it wasn't a thing where I forced it. And then when I made my record Wild Horse, it was just something that happened where we didn't expect it, and people latched onto it, and I was like, okay, cool. I think we found it. Now we just got to keep going. You have so many things that'll pull you in a direction of being something that you see on TikTok or on Instagram, and you're like, well, this is cool, and how should we do more of this? And it's like, at the end of the day, me being from New Jersey originally, my friends see me now and they go, how did you end up like this? But I mean, again, you have so many parts of that state where it's like you've got the inner city, you have the mountains, and then you have farmland and beach. And I'm not the only one who's ever worn a cowboy hat from New Jersey. I can promise you that. And I think Bruce Springsteen talks about it, where there's rodeos in South Jersey. I knew people who've done rodeos in South Jersey. And, it's like all that influence of being from there. Like even people from home, they see me now and they're like, this is exactly who you were supposed to be the whole time. So it's comforting knowing that, and knowing that like nothing has changed for me. It's just kind of diving deeper into what I like to be. It's wild because like when you have the record done, and I did this with the last record with Wild Horse, I recorded it and I let it sit for 6 months. I didn't touch it. I didn't listen to it. And then I did the same thing with Last of the Old Dogs. I listened to it once when we finished it, and then just let it sit for 3-4 months. I was on the road with Whiskey Myers, and we were playing some of the songs, but it was like I didn't really want to listen to the record. I knew that I liked it, but I wanted to fall in love with it. And then once it comes out a year later, because it was a year almost to the day that we finished it, and it's just fun to watch people give it life. It's like it's a record that had so much of me for 6-7 years prior to that, and then I get to watch people really enjoy it. Last of the Old Dogs is one that it makes people cry every time, and every time I have the story about mine, but then I'm in C2C in London, I'm watching some girl hold up a phone with a picture of her dog. And it makes me remember that, like, man, these stories are new for everybody. So it's like I could be tired of them by the time this is all done, but like it's just so fun to watch all that stuff have life. Sometimes something that burns that hot that early burns out quick that fast. And with a record, it's like, you put it out, and especially in today's world, you want it to do so good so early because you want that instant gratification of having a record be amazing. But like most of the records that I've loved, like Shane Smith and the Saints was one of those with Geronimo. I heard that back in, I think, 2017, and I played shows with him and the band last October. And I went up to Shane, and I was like, man, that record was so good. And he's like, man, it really didn't hit for us until last year, and having a record take that many years to like have life, you just never know. So it's like you can put it out, and it's just about having an excess of how you feel. You can have 5-10 records out, and people go back and re-listen to that stuff and be like, man, this is amazing, and you just don't know what's going to connect and when. So it's I'd rather it be the slow to rise, slow to fall mentality. So that song I was writing that day with a guy named Andy Skibb and an artist, Steve Mokler, who are great songwriters in town. And the week before, my folks had put down one of our old dogs, Grace. Grace was one of the ones that we had, I can name them. Like, it started off with Muggsy, then Christopher and Cody, and we had all these dogs. My mother worked or volunteered in an animal shelter. So all the time she would bring home a new dog, and when one would die, and we'd have another one at the door. And I was somewhere in high school, and this little pup shows up at our house, and she was the one that knew all the previous dogs because they become family members, right? Where it's like they're on the Christmas card. My friends all knew the dogs, and when one would die, someone would be like, "Oh man, this one passed." And I said, "Yeah," and they had memories with the dogs. So it's like with Grace, she was the one that was like around for most of the old ones. Like before me and my brother moved out, and when she died, she got sick. They had to put her down, and that was a tough one, man. That was the one that like really broke the family pretty hard because she was, it wasn't, the phrase didn't like come to me then, but we were in conversation, me, Steve, and Andy, and they were like, "Man, you okay?" And I was like, "Well, this is like not a big deal. You guys won't care, but like we had to put down one of my family dogs the other day." And Andy, who had dogs, is like, "Man, we just had to do that with one of mine. It sucks." Steve is allergic to dogs, so he can't have dogs. So he can't relate, but he's such a good songwriter that he can be a chameleon in the room. And I remember just sitting and saying, I was like, man, she was one of the last of the old dogs. She was the ones we've had for forever. And I think when I said that, Steve's ears perked up, and he was like, man, I know there's so many people who have had that dog, and it's funny. I'll listen to a Dirt Sheet from Cody Johnson, and it gets to the line about the dog underneath the tree, and I'm in my kitchen crying every time I hear that song. And it's just like there's this relationship with animals that people have sometimes, and you don't really realize that it does it to you. And that day we just sat, and by the end of the day we're sitting there, I'm cutting the vocal, and Andy's crying, I'm crying, Steve's just sitting there. He's like, I get it, but like, I can't have a dog. But yeah, it was one of those songs that I didn't expect to show up, and I didn't think would be something to happen, but that's the kind of power of a really good session. It's like one person's just really paying attention to what you're saying, and then you wind up writing a song that you didn't know you needed that day. So that's how that song showed up. I hope they find at least one song. That was always my favorite thing about records, is like I could listen to a record and be like, this is cool, but there was always one that I heard and I went, okay, that's mine. Like, that's my story. I don't know how they knew it, how they told it, but that's the one that connects with me. And you'll find yourself in a record of somebody, but like there's always like a couple of songs you skip over. But as long as people find the one that connects with them and relates to them somehow, I never want people to be so focused on what the story was for me. Like, Last of the Old Dogs could be about somebody's grandpa. It could be about somebody's, old relationship. It doesn't have to be about a dog. It could be about whatever you want. Hired Gun could be about an ex-lover. It could be about whatever you want. Like, finding your story in the song is the most important part to me. It doesn't have to be my story for you, like as long as it's something you can connect with and it means something. And that's the fun part, like for shows, is somebody will come up to me and tell me that it's connected with them through this way. And I go, okay, so now I have a new purpose for that song. It's not just my purpose anymore, which is kind of fun. You release all that pressure on yourself once you put it out. That's happened to everybody, right? That's why we love music. It's like, I could tell you Continuum from John Mayer when it first came out. I was going through some relationship, and I remember hearing that record going, how did he figure it out? Like, how did he know how I felt before it happened? But then as I get older, I listen to more Willie Nelson, and the way he talks about love and relationships in such simple language, I go, man, this guy, he figured out how to talk to us all so many years before any of us were even born, and in a way that everybody will understand for the rest of the time. So it's like, for me, then I start going like, well, how do I do that? How can I be that guy? But I go, maybe that's just special for him, and I could take a little bit from it, but that's what always made me excited is, just having a story be heard from somebody, having it connect with me, and if I could do that for somebody else, that's kind of my goal.